This is Module 1, Topic 1, Lesson 1 through 2. Our very first page of the homework is M1-12. So here we have two shapes, and it says, recall that if two figures are congruent, all corresponding sides and all corresponding angles have the same measure. Congruent means same size, same shape. So here we have those two shapes. We're going to use patty paper to determine which sides of the congruent figures are corresponding and which angles are corresponding. We lay the patty paper over the shape. We can trace the shape, and this will help us know if those two figures are truly congruent. Some of you can just see that offhand that they're congruent, but using patty paper will really help you. So we put the points on it, that way we know which points correspond to each other. And we lay it over the other shape, and we can see that yes, they are congruent. And this even helps us know which points correspond to each other. This also helps us know which sides are corresponding, because obviously between the corresponding points are the corresponding sides. So once we know the corresponding sides and the corresponding points, we're able to determine the corresponding angles. And there's a couple ways that we can show that those angles are the same measurement. We can either do arches that are just the same amount of arches, so like a single arch and a single arch means that they're going to be the same, or we of course can just color code them as well. Once we have all the angles marked, we can move on to the sides. So in the same way, we can just mark which sides are corresponding. And sometimes that's easier once we've designated which points are corresponding, which angles are corresponding. So we can either mark them with a single tick mark and a single tick mark, or we can just color code those sides to say that they are the same and corresponding side. Moving on to question 2, how can you slide, flip, or spin the figure on the left to obtain the figure on the right? Just looking at this, I think most of us know that this had to be rotated a bit in order to get over there. So some of you might think of rotating it and sliding it over, or some of you are thinking that there could be a single slide that can happen around a point somewhere in the middle. So we can mark a point about approximately in the middle, and then we can know that it is rotated 180 degrees about that point, and we can call that point O. To our next page, M1-29. We just have two problems here. Question number 3 is asking or saying, rotate the letter E 90 degrees clockwise. Be sure to identify your center of rotation. Since they did not give us a center of rotation to use, it is up to us to choose. You may want to choose a center that's going to make your E not go off the page. So just picking a point that will just make it so that this homework isn't too hard for you. I will be picking a point below the E, because then the E will not go off the page, it'll just be moving to the right. So I'm placing my point down below the E. Yours, of course, can be different. I'm going to lay my patty paper over both, tracing both the E and the point. And it's okay that the E is not exactly drawn, we just need the gist right now. Now in order to rotate it 90 degrees, that might be a little tricky. You of course can just eyeball it, but the best thing to do is to draw a line through the point and then do that same thing on your patty paper. This will give you a reference so that when you are rotating it, you can see when 90 degrees is. So you'll turn it until you have kind of just crosshairs, and that's where 90 degrees is. So now I know where my E is, I just need to get it off the page. So I'll trace over it, leaving an indent into the page, and then I'll be able to trace over that indent to give me a decent approximation of where that E should have moved. For question 4, it says transform the running man so that he's running in the opposite direction. They do not give us a line of reflection or a line of symmetry, so it's up to us to choose. So we, of course, can trace our running man onto our patty paper. And again, we don't need it to be exact, just some basic form of that shape, enough to get us the concept. So I'm choosing a line just a little bit to the right, and then I will trace that line onto my patty paper so I can use it as a reference point. So now that I flip over the patty paper, I can line up those lines to know that that's the exact point of reflection. And then I can just trace over the shape that I drew of the running man. And the real reason you want to include your line of reflection on your patty paper is to make sure that it's going to be the same distance away, because when you do that reflection, it needs to be moving that same distance when you reflect it. It can't just be flipped over.